Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie & Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Samuel Sanchez.
The yin to your yang, my friend.
Yes, sir. So happy New Year to everybody. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that can really have a significant impact on your family case or on your life in general. So, Sam, why don't you talk a little bit about, tell us what we're going to cover today.
Sure. We're going to talk about people making bad decisions. You know, a lot of times that's celebrities, and we've covered a couple of those high-profile relationship breakups. Want to talk a little bit about Rihanna and Chris Brown. Obviously, they were quite the item. It's been a minute, but when they broke up over allegations of domestic violence. And that's really going to be our topic for today's podcast, is how to deal with domestic violence, potential issues that you may encounter, and potential criminal and civil liabilities that can occur from that as well.
And the important thing to realize is it's not just a fight between you and your spouse. Whenever domestic violence comes out, that can affect your job. It can have criminal implications. It can have civil implications. It can affect, you're going to affect your ability to have a hunting license, or it can affect your ability to practice your profession potentially. So domestic violence issues are very, very tricky. There's something that you've got to be very, very careful about, and there's something that can have long and lasting impact on you for your entire life. So let's get into it.
Well, I would tell people, first and foremost, let's start at the inception. A big part of domestic violence a lot of times is that people kind of look at it and say, well, why didn't I see it coming? Relationships are complicated. Obviously, you and I both know that. But in that situation, what you have to understand is there are definitely tendencies. You want to make and do your due diligence. If you're getting into a new relationship, obviously in the social media world, do a little research, do a little background. I'm not saying go out and hire a private detective, but, a simple white pages search a lot of times can bring to light if anybody has a history. If they have a history, it doesn't mean they're a terrible person. It just means that, that's a red flag you should be wary of, because inevitably, what ends up happening is you get into a relationship. It's much easier to walk away. Or one, you're married, or two, you have children with somebody else. And the complexity that comes behind that is relationships, like you said, are complicated. And in that, if you don't catch it up front, a lot of times you get so dug in, you can't see your way out.
And that's a really good point, because you're talking about in the world of dating apps and, Bumble and whatever other dating apps are out there. There's a number of them, but you're getting the sales pitch on everybody on what their life looks like and how great they are. And sometimes you have to look under the surface and sort of peel back the onion, so to speak, in order to see what kind of, because everybody has stuff. So you got to sometimes you have to dig and see what's there.
Absolutely. I mean, what you don't want to do is you don't want to buy the window dressing, right? You just don't want to buy the cover, as everybody says. You want to read a little bit of the book, not just the interlude. What I will tell you, though, in that is a lot of things that can help. We've talked a little bit about prenuptials, and we'll deal with those a little more in another podcast. But I would tell you, this is a great opportunity. As you get into a relationship, it seems like it's going to be something serious, potentially marriage. Contemplate prenuptial agreement and terms that potentially can resolve any type of dispute if and when they come up. You can build those things into a prenuptial agreement.
The other thing I would tell you is if we're in the world of blended families, and that's something, if you're married to somebody, or you're getting married to somebody who has a domestic violence history, or some stuff pops up and your ex finds out about it, that could have serious implications on your custody arrangement. So it's definitely worth looking into if you're talking about a blended family.
Oh yeah, every decree at least in the state of Texas and in the state of Florida has a mandatory disclosure requirement that says that if you are going to reside with somebody or be in a physical relationship, that we're going to be together, somebody who has that history, a domestic violence or family violence history, it has to be disclosed to the other party. And like you said, most of the time that's going to precipitate some court action. On top of that, let's say, however, though, that you get into this relationship, you don't do a prenuptial, you decide, I want to marry this person. Why would I do that? I don't want to scare them off. You get married, and then all of a sudden things turn south. And it could be a one-time event. People always want to say that domestic violence is like repeated. It's over and over again. It's, a month of Sundays of getting, beat up or pushed in the closet or whatever it is that actions are going to be taken. And that's not necessarily the case. It can precipitate court filings with one encounter. So, and people always want to kind of discuss, or when they come in for consults and we'll talk about it, they're like, well, I don't know that I'm definitely qualified to say that it's family violence. And honestly, that has some discretionary boundaries for the court because I've been in front of judges that feel like one party slapping the other party. Well, doggone it, if it was a mutual combat situation, or it's somebody that was, feeling that they were being threatened, so it was a measure of self-defense, then it may not measure up to family violence. However, I will tell you that those encounters more and more, because courts are hypersensitive to these situations, can suffice for that type of a finding.
And and the other thing is how, especially in Texas, how subtle a domestic violence thing can actually become, because you can get a ticket, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but you could get a ticket, not even get arrested for an assault by contact, which is basically offensive touching. And if the officer that's out there that writes you the ticket check marks the box that says domestic violence, then that technically could potentially, if you plead guilty to that or no contest even, that could potentially follow you around as a domestic violence issue.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And to your point, they are far-reaching, because let's say that you did something like that, your ex finds out about it, wants to use it against you in court. You making that legal determination inadvertently can absolutely give them grounds, and those types of grounds have far-reaching implications. With Brady's implication in Texas, as an example, it can be that you lose your right to possess a firearm, ammunition, attend school trips with your child, because most school districts now in the state of Texas have prohibitions for all children to be around people who have, been the person who committed family violence.
I mean, because I've had a number of cases where we've had to go in and actually fight something as silly as a Class C misdemeanor offensive touching ticket because there's potential for a family violence conviction if you plead guilty to it or just decide you want to pay the fine. And keep in mind that a Class C misdemeanor offensive touching is merely a traffic ticket. I mean, it's really the equivalent of a traffic ticket in a lot of instances, because there's no injury, there's no reason to ramp it up to a Class B or a Class A misdemeanor. But if they tick mark the box that says family violence, then that potentially has a long-lasting effect, and it can affect you if you're ever charged with family violence again or have another charge like that. Then you immediately become in a lot more hot water.
Oh, absolutely. And I always try to tell clients that as much as you can, whether you're female or male, you want to take the high road in any type of interaction. And that becomes even more complicated if someone's intoxicated or under the what am I trying to say?
Under the influence, Sam?
Thank you very much, bro. Thank you. Under the influence of any type of narcotic or something that can alter their behavior. And a lot of times, you get in that situation and you say, like, what do I do? I mean, my intention was just to protect myself and my children, but here I am. Somebody filed a false claim that they're the victim when they were the perpetrator. I mean, all these things happen all the time. And the reason being is because those allegations, Bryan, are extremely powerful in court.
And especially in a custody suit, those things carry a lot of weight in a custody suit, and people feel like they can get an upper hand in a custody suit if there's a, if one spouse is an aggressor or an abuser, and the other spouse is the victim. I mean, that's unfortunately human nature being what it is, and people wanting to win. Sometimes that prevails over logic and everything else. And so you got to be really, really careful about that. In a situation where everyone tells you got to take the high road, this is definitely a situation where you take the high road, and cooling off periods are a very good thing. If you need to leave the house for a while and walk away from it, for a couple of hours, that's preferable to getting hauled away in a police car, I promise you.
Oh, without a doubt. And not only that, but Bryan, what I try to tell clients, and I know you've told them the same thing, this type of claim, it's like the holy grail of claims because its impact is far reaching. It can affect a property division if it's a divorce, meaning that somebody could get a disproportionate division of an estate. It can affect conservatorship, meaning that instead of having the foundational basis of joint managing conservatorship in Texas, if somebody has been found guilty or pled guilty to those types of charges, then they instantly divert to sole managing conservatorship, which we've talked about in previous podcasts. But that's huge. It can affect so many different things. And not only that,
correct me if I'm wrong, but the current state of the law is if you have an actual conviction for family violence, that precludes you from getting primary custody, at least for a period of time.
It absolutely does.
I believe it's 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you are correct. And not only that, Bryan, but like, let's say, heck, you know what? We're not married. Why am I listening to this podcast? Because I'm not married to her. But let's say you're in a dating relationship. Guess what? There's civil liability.
You don't have to be married.
Absolutely. So if somebody wants to sue somebody else in a bad breakup over their, alleged domestic violence, guess what? Absolutely have the ability to win that case and get money damages from that individual. So it's far-reaching, this topic. It can really kind of cross borders along many things.
And I think we always use the celebrity moniker because everybody knows celebrities, and they're unfortunately their lives are out on the public scene. But I mean, just the most recent ones, you hear about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and you hear about all the domestic violence and all the ugly things that went on in their relationship, and you hear about Rihanna and Chris Brown, and you hear, it seems like every week, there's another, celebrity with an allegation of family violence. And a lot of times those are precipitated by drugs and alcohol.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want everybody to understand, I mean, it's not one-sided. It's not just, male on female, it's same-sex violence. It's female on male. I mean, Lionel Richie is the perfect example. His case, he'd suffered under the yoke of domestic violence for years before he filed for divorce, used that as a basis to keep the majority of his licensing and property and, his intellectual property from his songs and his recordings to himself away from his wife based on those types of allegations and assertions. So it can cross.
And a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you that those, these types of physical interactions are really about power, not necessarily about, strength, or it's anger and power. That's why, women can be aggressors, men can be aggressors, and it really crosses the line. It's really when people get emotional and they get involved in relationships, these are the.
Oh, absolutely. And, so let's talk a little bit about, okay, so something bad happened after a Christmas party or a New Year's Eve party, or, just after a movie, or somebody sitting around having beer, or maybe there was no alcohol, whenever it's transpired. What do I do now? How do I protect my assets? Do I need to file? What do I do with the children? Do I leave the house? I mean, what do you tell clients, Bryan, in those situations?
I mean, I think you get yourself to safety first. You get yourself and the kids to safety first. If you have to call the police, if there's a violent episode taking place and you have to call the police, that's the time to do it. If you can leave the situation, get out of the situation, take care of your personal safety first. Absolutely.
The other thing I try to tell clients along with that is, look, we want neutral and independent third parties to verify, because the toughest fight you'll ever have in a courtroom is he said, she said, or she said, or he said, he said. Whatever that situation is, if it's the two people who are in that encounter, guess what? Perspective is going to rule. And the judge has a very difficult decision to try to figure out who's lying and who's not, or who's embellishing and who's not. So filing a report, getting an investigator out or a police officer to be able to go through those facts and document what transpired. If you suffered injuries, going to get treatment, taking photographs of what transpired. These are going to be the kinds of things that are really going to
The other thing is something that's very important in Texas, because we'll talk about protective orders in just a minute, but a history or pattern of abuse. That's very, very critical, because normally in a lot of abusive situations, whenever the police are finally called out, or whenever somebody finally reports the abuse, it's normally not the first time it's happened. It's normally, I think the average is at least the fifth time, at least. In most instances, it's a lot longer than that. But what I would tell you is that getting that history or pattern is very, very critical, because a protective order is something that you can get put in place that will protect you, would protect yourself, your family, your kids, whatever the case may be, from someone who is potentially violent towards you. And you have to be able to show a history or pattern of family violence in order to get that protective order. So that's where the documentation becomes critical.
Agreed. And there's a lot of confusion between clients that come in and they'll say, well, what's the difference between a restraining order or a standing order and a protective order? And so this is one of the things that I always try to tell clients, that the real distinction is a temporary restraining order or standing orders are usually prohibitive of actions, right? They tell them, hey, these are the rules that you must abide by. Protective orders protect people in places. It protects you in your job. It protects you in your home. It protects the children in their school. And that's different than don't do this. So, really understanding and getting counsel, talking to an attorney who's licensed in your area, getting good advice of how to proceed is really important, because what you have to have, or what I tell clients they need to have to be successful through those processes, is a plan. You have to have facts. You have to know where everything is, and a plan to be able to address concerns for you in the short term, because it may entail you leaving the house. If you've got the children and you were a victim of violence, you need to get them out to safety, because if you don't, what you've done is potentially open yourself up to a CPS investigation where neither one of you may end up with those children. Those children may be placed with family or foster care to protect them in that situation.
That's a huge deal that can come up. You've got to protect yourself and the kids first, and getting the help you need is critical. And keep in mind, there's tons of organizations, there's shelters, there's all kinds of people and organizations that can help, victims of domestic violence. So, if it's that bad, if the situation has gotten to that point, get yourself to safety and get the help that you need. There's plenty of valuable resources out there that can help people.
Absolutely. And to be clear, when we say family violence, it doesn't just mean between spouses or between the older parties. It can be, sometimes, unfortunately, it is a spouse against a child.
Or dating violence, or
dating violence. Exactly. And protective orders, emergency protective orders, which are obviously have criminal implications, depending on if you file a criminal complaint. But these are all things that are measures that you are going to need good, solid legal advice to move forward on.
The other thing I would tell you is that a lot of times domestic violence escalates. It starts out small, and then it gets more and more and more and more. And then you see a lot of these, I don't want to scare anybody, but you see a lot of these murder-suicides and different things that happen. A lot of times that starts out with family violence, and it's a hit here or a slap there, and it just escalates and escalates and escalates over a period of months or a period of years. And ultimately, somebody ends up dead. And that's obviously what we're trying to prevent.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the tragedy that, that comes from really the family law, the worst case scenarios. But, in that, Bryan, I think it's really important to tell our listeners and potential clients or the individuals who are looking for kind of good direction is that, first and foremost, you have to be in a place of safety. You have to be in a place of safety. And in that, when I say a plan, it really entails like understanding your financial situation and having a place to go. Because a lot of things that inhibit people from responding to that type of activity is they're a lot of times it's individuals who are very controlling.
Yep.
right? You've gotten into a relationship. They're controlling the finances. They're controlling the children. They're controlling every aspect of your life. And so when you look at it, you're like, I don't have the means or the mechanisms available to take the children or myself to safety because everything else is really kind of locked down.
I mean, that's
And
where
I can't tip them off.
that's where a church or a shelter or different victims advocacy groups could come in and help. That's don't feel like be based on a lack of resources that you can't get the help that you need, because it is out there.
Absolutely. And if you don't, what I want to encourage people to understand is if you don't act, you really set yourself up potentially in a courtroom to lose, because it's very complicated to get in, and the other side has a good lawyer and they come in and they say, well, the first thing they're going to say is, oh, it's happened so many times, but you never filed a police report. You never tried to protect the children. You never took them out of this, danger zone. But now you're just going to use it, for your own purposes, really to just try to get an advantage. And those are all false claims when they may not be. So, it really just becomes
that's where the documentation is key. And then another distinctive difference, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this before, but another distinctive difference between a protective order and a restraining order is a violation of a protective order carries with it a felony. So if a perpetrator of violence, there's a protective order issued and that person violates, and whether that's contact or whether that's calling on the phone or whether that's showing up at your house or whatever the case may be, if you have a protective order and the person violates the specific provisions of the protective order, that becomes a felony charge, which carries with it potential prison implications. So that's why they take that very, very seriously. And it's something that it's one of those measures that if you need the protection, get the protection.
Absolutely. But on the flip side of that, what I want to encourage individuals who are out there scheming and thinking, oh, perfect, I have the perfect setup in which to maybe lie, get an advantage, try to get ahead. That is a nuclear weapon that will absolutely self-detonate in your face if you go in with the wrong intentions. It's the one thing that will turn a court against you and has absolute both civil penalties and potential criminal penalties.
Right. There are criminal penalties for false allegations of family violence. So don't look at it as an arrow in the quiver that you can fire in a custody case. That's not the way that this is supposed to work. And you're absolutely 100% right. It's the bomb that will blow up in your face.
Absolutely. And, judges take it extremely seriously. Judges are always going to err on the side of caution. So if it's that you need some immediate assistance and you're like, hey, the church, the organization that was out there, domestic violence organization, they got me to a certain point, but now what's next? I need family, I need resources. You can get emergency temporary orders to get in front of a court to get you that type of relief or access so that you can recover information, personal property, financial resources to be able to kind of move forward.
Let's talk about the other side of this. Let's say you've had a protective order slapped on you. Let's say you didn't do anything. Let's say you've had a protective order slapped on you. What do you do at that point?
Oh, you absolutely do not sit on your hands. The worst thing that you can do is not defend yourself in that situation. You need to hire counsel and you need to get in there and address those and prove that those assertions or allegations are false. So you want to start gathering information, gather up the things that are going to show or demonstrate to the court and to other individuals that those accusations, those claims are false. And then get into court with counsel. And
to keep in mind that usually when a protective order is issued, there's a temporary ex parte protective order that's issued that's only in place for usually at maximum about 20 days. So you would have to have a court hearing within 20 days. So that period of time is your time to get your case together, get your evidence together and stuff that you can use to refute these allegations, because as we talked about before, they have long and lasting impacts, and a protective order, a final protective order, can be entered before a divorce trial even occurs. So
absolutely. So you could win that whole game, win that entire divorce proceeding on that one hearing that happens well in advance. And on that, the implications of a protective order, so that everybody knows, they can last up to 2 years. And even at the expiration of the 2-year period, you can get them extended. So, think about that. That limits your ability. If you're a police officer or a federal agent, you have, a requirement to carry a firearm. This could absolutely affect your employment. It could affect where you live. Many places, many apartments, condos do not allow people who've been convicted of family violence or have a protective order issued against them to be able to maintain residences in those areas. School districts prohibit you. So it's very long lasting, the implications from such actions. So defend yourself.
Texas, we have conceal and carry permits. You're not going to be able to have a conceal and carry permit. Hunting license, you're not going to probably be able to get a hunting license. Anything dealing with a firearm, it's going to have a lasting impact on that.
Oh, not only that, bro, but like sometimes people will even go in and you can get licenses suspended over that. So, depending on your clearance, if you have a security clearance, you're in the military, you can get you can get privileges suspended. You can get demotions in rank. I mean, there's so many things that can happen from those types of encounters. So you just want to make sure, one, avoid them at all costs if you can. Advice number one, right? Get out, take the high road, go cool off, stay somewhere else, let everybody simmer down. But if you are ever in that situation, then make sure that, one, you document everything the way it happened, when it happened, write down some journal notes, take a note on your phone, do a voice memo, take some photographs to show, hey, look, she didn't have any scratches, or hey, look, he didn't have a bruise on his face where he said I punched him in the face. You know what I'm saying? Like these.
I mean, record the altercation if it comes down to it. Everybody's smartphone these days is a recording device. So, if you need to record the altercation, but be very, very careful. And one thing I would tell you is that if you ever are slapped with a protective order and one is served on you, you follow that protective order to the letter. Always err on the side of caution, because you don't want to add to an already difficult situation with some kind of potential criminal charge, because they're going to say you violated a protective order. So make sure you follow that to the letter.
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example of that, Bryan, as a closing thought. I will tell you, I had a case where an individual went out, got an emergency protective order against her spouse. And usually she had a huge advantage, but knew that she was very likely to lose at the temporary hearing that was going to come, whether to decide whether the court was going to issue that as a permanent protective order. In that interim time, what she did was she contacted her spouse, soon to be ex, and said, hey, you know what? I'm so sorry. Let's settle things down. Let's meet over a cup of coffee. Don't worry. It'll be in a public place. And he did it. And you know what he did? He violated that protective order. And you know what she did? She called the cops. And you know where he ended up? In jail. So
yes, there's plenty of horror stories out there.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to look at the other person across from you and say that they would ever do something like that. You just have to know that by the time it gets to the seriousness of somebody filing those types of papers against you, you have to know what's in that order. And to your point, abide by it 100%.
I have a friend of mine does criminal work, and he was involved in a very, very contentious case, and a gentleman was locked up for a family violence dispute. A protective order was slapped on him. I guess he made bail, and he was let out. And I guess the lady sweet talked him a little bit, or whatever happened. They were in communication, and he showed back up at her apartment. And guess what? She calls the police. He gets arrested for violating the protective order. So now he's not only is he dealing with the underlying family violence charge, he's dealing with the violation of a protective order charge as well. And of course, the ex, I don't know if she was the spouse or the girlfriend, was saying, I didn't ask him to come over here. I don't know what you're talking about. So you have to be very, very careful. These things are highly emotional, and there's a lot of emotions that go along with it, but you have to keep your brain on if there's a situation like this that comes up.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, great advice. I know this is a hot button topic. Hopefully nobody ever encounters it, but obviously it does happen more frequently than we'd like to see.
And like I said, I mean, I'm not saying that every allegation of family violence is false. There are some instances where there's false allegations of family violence. There are some situations where it's absolutely warranted, and there absolutely is family violence because like you talked about earlier, Sam, this is most of the time violence is a power play in a relationship, and it's dealing with power as opposed to the physical injury that's caused. And but if you are in a situation like that, it's best you're not going to get in trouble for reporting the truth. So if you're ever in a situation where violence has occurred and you need to get out of that situation, make sure your safety is paramount, and make sure you get out of that situation and do what you have to do. You're not going to be accused of false allegations of family abuse if something really happened. They're going to err on the side of caution. So you need to, but at the same time, if you are accused of something and you're absolutely certain you didn't do anything, you need to protect yourself as well. This is a very, very hot button issue, and you need good counsel, and you need to have a good organized case, and moving forward and defending yourself or prosecuting it either way.
Either way, got to have a lawyer.
Sir, so if you like what you're hearing on the Top Texas Lawyers podcast, go on to iTunes or whatever device you are listening on. If there's any topics you'd like to hear, please let us know. Please leave us some comments, and we'll be happy to talk about them. We're going to be bringing you a lot more shows this year. To tease future episodes, we're gonna be talking about a lot of other different topics. We're gonna branch out into real estate. We're gonna branch out into some criminal law, DWIs. We're gonna be talking about a lot of stuff. So this is our first full year of doing this. So we're excited about what's going to happen. So if you like what you hear, leave us a review and let us know what you think.
Absolutely.
And so I wish you the best, Sam, and we will talk next time. I thank you for your time, and thank you for the valuable information.
Of course. Anytime, Bryan. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.